And what is going on, Devils fans? It is, as always, your host, your best friend, your confidant, your number one source, Neil Villapiano, and welcome to a draft slash free agency discussion episode of the Devil's State of Mind podcast, right here on the Hockey Podcast Network, as well as Sports Wire Radio, the best place to get everything you need to know about your soon to be new look New Jersey Devils. And as always, Devils fans, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to check out this episode. I hope you are having a fantastic day wherever you're checking this out. Make sure, if you haven't already, if you're here on YouTube, leave a like on the video, but also don't forget to hit that subscribe button and also hit that notification bell so you get notified every time a new episode here on YouTube comes out. And also, again, if you're just joining, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. And make sure to leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. Helps out the podcast tremendously. So, again, thank you to everybody here. Really, really appreciate all the support. And we are now into one of the more exciting parts, if not the most exciting part of the NHL offseason. That is draft slash free agency. I'm recording this here on June 30th, on the eve of NHL free agency. And there's already been a bunch of names that were at the top of the free agent list that are now no longer on there. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. But what we're going to do is we're going to start by recapping who the Devils selected in this year's NHL entry draft. We are also going to dive in to talking a little bit about the two RFAs that were qualified by the Devils and what this means for them moving forward. And then lastly, we'll kind of do a free agency preview, kind of talking about what exactly the Devils need to do, free agency slash trade, because obviously I think that there's more likely we're going to get some more trades than maybe free agent moves from Tom Fitzgerald this off season. But you never know. We'll keep our eyes on everything. So as always, Devils fans, we have a bunch to get to here on the Devil's State of Mind podcast. So let's not waste any more time and get rolling. And we will get rolling and drop the puck with recapping, again, as I mentioned before, recapping what the Devils did at this year's NHL entry draft. I'm actually going to use Corey Proneman's analysis or kind of breakdown of a lot of the Devils picks. He covers NHL prospects in the draft for The Athletic. And I'm going to read to you really quickly this bit of a breakdown here that was written by Peter Baugh, who covers the Devils and also the Rangers and really the New York metropolitan area hockey for The Athletic. So the Devils did not have a first-round pick this year because of the Jacob Markstrom trade last summer. Tom Fitzgerald got his first crack at drafting at number 50, where he took Conrad Fonderk from the U.S. National Development Program. Fonderk is slated to play at Boston University next summer, along with some other Devils prospects. Prodman had him ranked at number 83 in the class, so the Devils did reach a bit in his eyes, but colleague Scott Wheeler ranked him at 49 at 49. So it's kind of a toss-up there, I guess, depending on the analyst that you speak to. With their second-round pick or their second-round pick, the Devils snagged Ben Keevan, who played in the USHL last season. The Devils had success with second-round picks in the past few years, with recently signed Lenny Haminaho in 2023, and of course, Seamus Casey in 2022. So New Jersey has to hope for one, if not both, Fonderk and Keevan could also emerge as potential NHLers. Devils chief scout Mark Dennehy described Fonderk as a first-round talent. He noted he dealt with injuries, but said, quote, those type of things heal, and his ceiling as an all-around player, really a dynamic producer, was worth the risk, end quote. He said Keevan, who is headed to Arizona State next year, is a goal scorer, quote, we didn't think he'd be there, and he was, end quote. Gustav Hillstrom was New Jersey's best value pick, according to Prodman. He had him at number 67, and the Devils took him in the fourth round at number 114. He's a 6'2" center from Sweden, and New Jersey also added, because they do this every year, they added a goaltender, a very tall goaltender by the name of Trenton Bennett in the fourth round. He is 6'8". So Mikhail Yegorov is no longer the tallest netminder that the Devils have in their system. It is now Trenton Bennett. His size in the net is certainly an advantage. and The Athletic gave the Devils a C grade for their draft. Now, I have looked at a bunch of different opinion pieces on how the Devils did. And really, it just kind of boils down to who you ask. I've seen, like I just mentioned, you see a C. There's been a B. Some people even gave the Devils an A or an A minus. I think again, it's all just kind of depending on who you ask. But the bottom line is, as we all know, and I've mentioned numerous times before, is that we won't know if these are good picks or not until we have the chance to see them play in the NHL or whatever the case may be. And that's usually going to be between 2 to 3 years from now. So it's going to be some time. And as we also know, not every player you draft is going to end up either being in the NHL or even being on your team if they make it to the NHL because they could be involved in trades and other things like that. So let's now get into these picks. And we'll start again, as I mentioned before, with Devils' first pick at pick 50, Conrad Fonderk. And the analysis from Prodman is this. Fonderk was a highly touted player for a few years, but his draft season didn't go as planned, in part due to inconsistent play and injury. Fonderk is a very skilled forward with the hands, vision, and shot to run a power play at higher levels. The dynamic elements in his game weren't always on display, though, as much as they were when he was an underager. As the season went on, I questioned if his offensive sense was truly special enough. He's a steady two-way player, though, who can PK, is a good skater, and has played center at a high level at times. Even though I see him as a pro winger, I'm unsure what he is in the NHL, but he's good enough at everything to be right in the conversation to potentially make it. So Mondrick is just kind of the beginning of what the Devils and really Tom Fitzgerald wanted to do this year, which was the exact opposite of what they did last season. At last year's draft, they focused a lot on size. A lot of their guys were 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", really tall guys. This year, not as much. They really focused a lot more on speed and skill, which I know for some Devils fans is something that they would prefer to see, especially with the lack of offensive skill that this team has at times, especially in that bottom six. But again, you're looking at guys who were not going to make this team in the next, for another 2 or 3 years, essentially. But nonetheless, you want to continue to stockpile your prospect pool with talent that you can continue to implement. And obviously, it would help out with the talent and also with salary cap questions and issues that might come up in later years. So all these draft picks are important in one way or the other. As I mentioned before, the next pick the Devils had was at pick number 63, taking Benjamin Keevan, 6 foot, 183 pounds, and he played for the Des Moines Buccaneers of the USHL. So the analysis from Prodman is Keevan has been a good USHL player over the past 2 seasons, although his draft season wasn't as impressive in his underage year. His offensive talents are clear. He's a highly skilled winger with legit NHL speed and hands. He sees the ice at a high level, hitting seams and making a lot of difficult plays. He has the ability to create and finish chances at the higher levels. He's talented but inconsistent. His game lacks physicality and he stays on the perimeter a lot, making me wonder how he will fare against bigger, tougher players. He has the talent to play NHL games, though. And Prominent made it clear that the top two guys the Devils took, in both Fonderk and Keevan here, are the most likely guys that he believes he could see playing in the NHL for the Devils in the future. So, again, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the truth. It doesn't mean that other guys the Devils selected are not going to end up being NHL players down the road. It's just from his own evaluation and breakdown as a whole. I think that that's really, really important. So now we'll shift to the third pick that the Devils had at pick 90, which you kind of saw there for just a moment. But they took Mason Moe, a forward who played for the Madison Capitals, also of the USHL. Nelson from Prodman reads, Moe had a good season with Madison, producing at a point per game. He also represented Team USA various times at the Hlinka World Junior A and at times with the National Development Team. He's a good skater with a strong skill level. Mo has the ability to beat defenders with pace and generate a lot of controlled entries. He's creative as a handler and passer. I wouldn't describe him as a super high compete type, but he gets to the inside of the offensive zone well enough. He's played center in junior, but if he makes it in the NHL, he's probably a winger. He has a lot of interesting traits, but Mo lacks a clear identity for an NHL role currently. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean that this kid cannot become something pretty big down the road. I think that it mainly just means that Mo, being as young as he is still trying to figure out what specifically works for him overall in the in professional hockey. And so he'll have more time to figure that out as he continues to play in the USHL and other leagues like that. I think he might actually be potentially playing college hockey next year. I'll have to double check on that. But nonetheless, that's who the Devils took at pick number 90. And then you go 9 picks later, and the Devils took, as I mentioned before, their annual let's draft the goaltender and continue to have a strong or very strong goaltending prospect pool, as they took Trenton Bennett, goaltender, who was the third string goaltender for the Owen Sound Attack of the Ontario Hockey League, 6'8", 209 pounds. So clearly, as usual, the Devils really, really love the size of these goaltenders in the draft. Quick little analysis here from Prodman. Bennett is a massive goalie who intrigues scouts with his pro potential. In his best games, I thought he looked like a legit prospect, but those games were inconsistent even at a lower level of competition. He has decent hockey sense, but his side to side quickness could be an issue at higher levels. So essentially, I'm going to simplify that for all of you. He is describing Pronman as a very, very raw prospect. That's really what it all comes down to here. So that is not something that Devils fans should necessarily worry about. It just means that he needs a lot more time to play more games and to continue to develop. And you never know. You never know when somebody who we don't expect much of in the draft ends up becoming something big, especially between the pipes. I think a good example of this, honestly, even though he is still yet to play a level of professional hockey, is Mikhail Yegorov, because he's already had a tremendous amount of success playing at Boston University and certainly is going to hope to replicate that going into next year. But he's a guy that a lot of us didn't know much about until last year. And now there's a lot of buzz around him, a lot of excitement. And I could label off so many guys. I think one of the biggest examples is look at Henrik Lundqvist, right? Henrik Lundqvist was a late round pick. Nobody knew much about him at all. And then he ends up making it to the NHL and goes on to have a Hall of Fame career as arguably one of the greatest goaltenders of the modern age of the NHL and one of the greatest goaltenders, certainly in New York Rangers history. I know Devils fans, that was not maybe the best example considering it was the Rangers, but I wanted to just kind of give an example of you don't know. We will have to see what happens in the later years moving forward. The next pick for the Devils came at pick 114 when they took centerman Gustav Hillstrom, who's currently playing for Brynäs IF, their under 20 team in the under 20 National League over in Sweden. Now, Prodman has him in the tier of has a chance to play games. So again, another guy that he feels confident that could definitely become an NHL player. His analysis of Hillstrom reads, Hillstrom had a solid year at the Swedish junior level and got extended time on a good SHL team, although he wasn't as impressive with Sweden's under 18 team. He's a good pro prospect because of his length, speed, and having some scoring touch while playing the middle. Hillstrom's straight line attack style may be better suited for the wing, though, as he doesn't make many plays. His compete off the puck is fine, but not a major selling point to where you could foresee him being a matchup player. He ticks a lot of boxes to be interesting, but it's not clear what he would be in the NHL. So, again, yet another raw prospect. And that's kind of something that you really should expect in the later rounds. Just you're basically going off of your own board. You're going off of the potential if everything goes right, and that's kind of what you're hoping for. I mean, look at what happened with you look essentially at what happened with Jesper Bratt, right? Jesper Bratt's sixth round pick, and essentially he becomes a star player for this Devils team several years later. So again, you just have to look at these guys and you have to try to do your best to project and say, well, let's see what happens. Let's see if they can develop. Let's try to help them develop, and hopefully they can become something for us down the road. So that's really what it is. Now, this is the second to last pick that the Devils made, but it's the last pick that Pronman has any sort of analysis on. And I'll explain to you in just a minute why. But the Devils at pick 161 took David Rossival, a forward for Billy Tigre Liberec of the under 20 Czechia League. That's currently where he's at. Roosevelt is a strong skater with good hands who competes hard and shows a willingness to get to the net to create offense. He's a quality two-way winger who could earn a coach's touch. The debate on his game will be his sense and how much pure offense he has. So again, another one of those raw prospects that the Devils are basically taking a chance on. And then the last guy that the Devils took is quite an unknown to a lot of people, as they took Sieg Holmgren, a right-handed defenseman who's currently playing also for Brynäs IF of the under 20 team in Sweden in that national league. So he's 6'1", 181 pounds. He is a pretty solid defenseman overall from what I can read. But again, just another one of those very, very raw and very young prospects that we're probably not going to end up knowing a lot about until several years down the road. So overall, that is who the Devils decided to go with and take in this year's entry level draft. And let me know what you guys think overall of the draft. I would say from a lot of the things I read and a lot of the video that I was able to actually watch, I think the Devils actually did pretty well in this draft, all things considered. I'm going to give them a B minus in this draft. I mean, obviously, with what they ended up having in this draft, no first round pick, but still getting a lot of good value. I think it's simply that the Devils did as good of a job as they could with what they had. Now, I know a lot of people were hoping that maybe the Devils would be active with those picks and maybe trying to move them to get other players and get assets. But with there being also a decentralized draft, I think that that definitely hurt a lot of teams, including Tom Fitzgerald, in feeling as comfortable making deals. But again, I don't want to give Fitzgerald too many excuses because he still has a lot of work to do to make this Devils team really good in the now. He's certainly trying to help them in the future, but a lot of impatient Devils fans out there, like myself included, want to see this team improve now. But nonetheless, I still enjoy going through the NHL draft. Again, I'll give them a B minus for this one. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section here on YouTube, and also over on social media as well. Devil's State of Mind on Instagram and Devil's State over on Twitter. Now, on to the present day Devils. About 2 hours ago, we got word that the New Jersey Devils have issued qualifying offers to both Luke Hughes and Cody Glass. Now, the Luke Hughes one doesn't surprise us as much. What does surprise us is the Cody Glass qualifying offer, because as of literally a couple of hours ago, we were under the impression, as it was made clear, that Cody Glass was not going to be given a qualifying offer, and instead he was going to test free agency. But Elliot Friedman on a radio station for Sportsnet did say that the Devils were backtracking on that and were going to offer Cody Glass his qualifying offer because of the fact that there was going to be a lot of interest in him in free agency. So the Devils, not wanting to risk it, decided to give the qualifying offer to Cody Glass. The deadline, by the way, for offering, your RFAs a qualifying offer was 5 p.m. today. So that's why it's important. There were 3 guys that were not given qualifying offers: Nolan Foote, defenseman Santeri Hataka, and goaltender Isaac Poulter. Now, again, just because they weren't offered doesn't mean that they won't get re-signed. But I think that there's a good chance that 1 or 2 of those guys are not going to get re-signed by the Devils. If I were to pick one, I would probably say Nolan Foote. And that's mainly because of the fact that Nolan Foote has been with the Devils now for the better part of almost 5 years. And really, I just don't see where he can fit in this role anymore with, in this Devils organization. So I think it's just time for both sides to, move away from each other. Nolan Foote will get an opportunity to try to see if he can find another team, and the Devils will look to try to find someone to add onto the roster that could probably help them more in the right now. For Santeri Hataka and also Isaac Poulter, they both have shown a lot of promise. And I think that the Devils would be wise to try to keep them around, but also with Poulter, because of, you know, getting another goaltender in the system through this draft, it might be harder for him to find a spot here, and he might look for another team where he may have a better shot of getting closer to playing in the NHL. He's obviously been a backup in the NHL, but only on emergency basis, really, for a couple of games. So we haven't really seen a lot of him in the NHL. But he's had a lot of success in the ECHL with the Adirondack Thunder a couple of years ago. Also, a little bit of success with the Utica Comets. So he's been on the cusp, but he hasn't gotten there yet. But we'll see. But going back to both Luke Hughes and Cody Glass, and I'll start with Cody Glass again. He will most likely sign his qualifying offer. I think it would be unlikely that he won't. It'll be a 1 year contract at $2.5 million, which I know that a lot of Devils fans, including myself, didn't want to see them go and sign him to. But if he was going to get more money than that in the free agency market, I could see why the Devils didn't want to take the risk on losing him. So Cody Glass is definitely going to play in the Devils' bottom six, like he did this past year for the most part. Either he'll be the third centerman if it's not Dawson Mercer, or he'll be that fourth centerman on that bottom six. But at least we're adding a little bit here to the bottom six, kind of keeping a little bit of what we hope to be, the productive parts of the bottom six, or what little we had really last year. So overall, it is what it is. It's not a bad move to keep him around. So we'll go from there. With Luke Hughes, guys, he's not going to sign the 1 year qualifying offer and then try to figure it out next year. All this does is it just gives the Devils more time to figure it out. I don't know if the Devils are prioritizing Luke Hughes' long-term extension right now, considering the fact that tomorrow's the first day of free agency. However, we have heard some rumors here and there that the Devils could look to move guys like Andre Palat and Dougie Hamilton's contracts to other teams to try to open up even more cap space. Keep in mind, tomorrow, July 1st, 2025, both Andre Palat and Dougie Hamilton will then have a 10-team no trade clause. So only 10 teams. So there could be other teams out there that the Devils could trade one of these players to if the other team wants them, and get salary cap space to make other moves. I think one of Palat or Dougie is going to end up getting moved. Not sure what is going to happen specifically, but I think that that's going to end up being the case. But regardless, I still believe that Luke Hughes will absolutely get a long-term deal. I don't expect it to be a 3 or 4 year deal. I expect it to be more of a 7 to 8 year deal. Maybe they give him 6, who knows? But nonetheless, I really wouldn't worry about it. The bottom line is that both of those guys are going to be on the roster next year. Luke Hughes will absolutely get that long-term deal signed sooner rather than later. I don't think it's going to last another month or two. I think it's going to get done, and everybody's going to be able to chill and relax. With Cody Glass, again, he'll get a 1 year kind of prove it qualifying offer. But if he doesn't accept that, he is arbitration eligible, which the Devils have obviously had experience with that with guys like Timo Meier and more specifically Jesper Bratt for 2 years where they had to deal with that. But I just don't see a world where Cody would do that. Maybe he'll be a little bit upset because he was hoping that he could go to free agency and really try to see what his value could be. But I don't know. It just doesn't seem like that he would really, really be that pissed off that he would end up doing that. So I think the bottom line is simply this, that I think Cody Glass will absolutely accept this qualifying offer. He'll be on a 1 year deal at $2.5 million, which if the Devils get salary cap relief even more, it may not be that bad of a move, especially because you're going to not want to spend a huge amount of your cap space on that bottom six. You will have to retool, and you have to certainly pay a decent amount to get some good bottom six depth scoring, but you can't go crazy either. I think that's really kind of the way you got to look at it. So, that's pretty much what's going on with this. This isn't a surprise. Again, the Luke Hughes one isn't a surprise. Cody was a little bit more, only because we didn't expect him to get qualified, but that ends up being the case. So both those guys get a little bit more time to negotiate with them, and we will see what happens with both of them moving forward. So again, Devils have extended a qualifying offer to both Luke Hughes and Cody Glass for next season. So lastly here, Lastly, we will do a kind of a quick little preview of the NHL free agency for the New Jersey Devils. But before I jump into that, just wanted to bring this up from the hockey news. They kind of broke it down really, really well over on Twitter. Earlier today, really earlier today, we had a quick 10-minute burst of major contract signings other than the Kuzmenko one. No offense to Andrei Kuzmenko, but we did have Mitch Marner being traded to the Vegas Golden Knights from the Toronto Maple Leafs for Nicholas Waugh, and then he signs an 8-year deal at $12 million. Not a surprise considering the fact that there have been speculation and rumors about him going to Vegas for several weeks now. So that gets done. Ivan Provorov stays in the Metropolitan Division, signing a 7-year, $8.5 million deal. And I'm going to piggyback off of what Alex Chauvency of the Hockey Writers said earlier today. That contract, that extension that Jonathan Kovacevic signed earlier this past year looks that much better with some of the other big contracts that have been signed by defensemen over the last couple of days. Aaron Ekblad stays in Florida, takes a massive pay cut, 8 years, $6.1 million. Brad Marchand stays in Florida, also on a very team-friendly deal, 6 years at $5.33 million. He'll be 43 by the time that contract comes to an end. But again, Bill Zito keeping everybody around. Bennett's still there. Now you bring back Ekblad. Now you bring back Marchand. I don't know if Nate Schmidt's going to stick around. Wouldn't surprise me if he signed like a 1-year deal or something to stick around. But you have that. And as I mentioned just moments ago, Andrei Kuzmenko signing a 1-year deal with LA at $4.3 million, which is pretty good. This is the Kings were the third team last season that he played for, got traded from the Flames to the Philadelphia Flyers, and then went from the Flyers to the LA Kings, where he finally found a really good role, had a pretty good end to the year. And so now he gets another prove-it contract at a pretty high rate. So good for Andrei Kuzmenko. But yeah, a lot of craziness in the NHL. So several of the top guys in the free agent market, Marner, Ekblad, Marchand, are now all off the board. So Nikolai Ehlers has become the most quote-unquote coveted free agent in this year's free agency class going into tomorrow, unless by the time this episode comes out, something else happens and maybe Ehlers already gets moved somewhere else. I do not know. But let's talk about the Devils. I've mentioned this a boatload of times, so I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse here when I talk about what the Devils need to do. Let's just really kind of get into it. So first and foremost, the Devils do have to figure out how to retool that bottom six. And they've already kind of done that a bit with trading Eric Holla to Nashville. And now they're going to bring back Cody Glass. So we'll see how that goes. But there's several other spots that need to be filled. Now, again, some guys could get moved from the top six to the bottom six, like Stefan Nason. I think that could be a likely scenario. And especially if you're looking for a top six winger, which I think the Devils will absolutely look for. They really should be looking for two really solid top 9 forwards. I think that would be ideal. And so that's what I think is going to be one of the main focuses. Re-signing Luke Hughes is obviously an important one, but also the backup goaltender. And we found this out earlier today that talks are still ongoing between the Devils and Jake Allen at the time of this recording. Now, again, it's possible that things could change before tomorrow's deadline, or not tomorrow's deadline, before the beginning of free agency tomorrow at noon Eastern. I think the most likely thing here is that the Devils are going to end up letting Jake Allen walk. From the reports we're hearing about him potentially getting $5+ million for 2 years, I just don't think the Devils, it would be wise for them to give him that money. I know that people are not the biggest supporters of Nico Dawes, but this kid has played over 50 games in the NHL, has shown several big flashes of a guy that can really, really help this team long-term, be one of the long-term solutions, especially knowing that Jacob Markstrom, we don't know if they're going to be able to get an extension done. I imagine that they will. And we don't know for how much longer does Jacob Markstrom have left in the tank in terms of playing at the high level that he played at last year. So There is a risk involved, especially with how well the goaltending went last year. Are you going to end up getting back into a position where your goaltending is struggling yet again? I don't think that that's the case, but I can understand people's worry. If the Devils can get Jake Allen at less than $5 million, maybe I'd say a 2-year deal at $3 million something. I'd be fine with it. I'd be fine with bringing him back. But it also means that I think, honestly, Nico Dawes, you have to maybe start to consider that maybe he should be part of another deal to maybe get someone else in here, not necessarily for the goaltending, but for help in the forward core and the team in general in the right now. That's just what I'm saying with it. So backup goaltending is also important here in terms of what the Devils need to do this offseason. I will leave you with this. Your expectation of what this free agency should be is very low. And that's not necessarily because of who the general manager of this Devils team is, but the fact of the matter is that this is an incredibly weak free agency class, especially with some of the moves that have already been made. Marner's off the board. Marchand's off the board. Several other guys are off the board. The top two forwards, top six forwards that are available are Nikolai Ehlers, who could get upwards to $8, $9, $10 million, depending on what team he goes to. And you have Brock Besser, who could get up to $6, $7 million. And I don't know if the Devils really should be looking at that. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The best route the Devils can take is via trade. And we're already hearing that a lot of teams are going to probably start making trades once free agency kind of dies down. And then we might see a lot more action happen, particularly with the Devils. I think that's the way you got to look at it. So the bottom line is this. Don't freak out if the Devils don't make a huge amount of moves free agency wise. They might make 2 or 3 if they're looking for bottom 6 help, which again might be hard to find in this free agency class, but you never know. You never know. But I think the reality is that the moves that Devils fans really want to see that could really, really kind of help this Devils team in the now might be via trade. And who knows? Guys like Dougie Hamilton, maybe Andre Palat, maybe could be moved for assets that could help this team now. We shall see. I don't want to make any promises. I don't want to get people's hopes up, but you got to just, we have to try to be a little bit patient here and just give Tom Fitzgerald at least the benefit of the doubt to give him the opportunity to try to fix this team. And if he doesn't, and things are struggling at the beginning of the year, he's got to go. That's simply how it is. You got to give him this opportunity. We'll see. He knows he's on the hot seat. So now we got to figure. So now he's got to back it up. He made a lot of big talk at the end of the season presser saying that changes are coming. We're not coming back with the same team. We'll see. He did live up to his promise about going big game hunting for goaltending last year, and he did, and he got Jacob Markstrom. So let's see if he can back up what he's saying. If you're going to talk the talk, you better walk the walk, and that's really how I look at it here. So we shall see. But on that note, Devils fans, that's going to do it for this edition of the Devils State of Mind podcast. As always, guys, thank you so much for checking out all these episodes. Leave a like and subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't already. And also make sure to subscribe over wherever you listen to podcasts. And on Apple or Spotify, if you can, make sure to leave a 5-star rating. Helps out the podcast continue to grow tremendously. And also make sure to follow us on Instagram at Devil State of Mind and also over on Twitter at Devil State. And also make sure to check out our TikTok as well, Neil.Villapiano, as I will post clips from every single episode. And also I will post clips of breaking news and breakdowns of different things that happen with your New Jersey Devils. But as always, thank you guys so very much for hanging out with me today on this Devil State of Mind podcast episode. And we will see you in the next episode. Everyone, continue to be the awesome people that you are. And as I always say, at the end of every episode, put those horns up, baby, and let's go Devils.